All right, ended up, if I remember right, is Deuteronomy 11:16.
Yep.
Okay. And this is the chapter kind of where he's reviewing the blessings and the curses that he will give them. And up in verse 8, he said 2 reasons why we should observe was so that they may have strength to go in and take over the land. And then in verse 9, that they may live long in the land. And then in verse 13, we see that if the people are faithful, the Lord, to serve the Lord, then in verse 14, he says he'll send the rain to them. We talked about why the rain was important compared to how they farmed in Egypt. Now in 16 we see, be careful, or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. So now we're kind of getting into the curse of this. If you don't follow me, 17, then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and he will shut up the heavens so that it will not rain, and the ground will yield no produce, and you will soon perish from the good land the Lord is giving you.
So is that why Las Vegas is not getting any rain?
Could be. Could be. You know, one of the reasons why the Sahara Desert turned into a desert after the global flood, climate change took place, but one of the bigger theories is that as they cut down their trees, as people cut down trees throughout the world, trees attract moisture. Somehow trees and plants as a whole are part of the water cycle, apparently. So if you get rid of plant life, you will go into more of a desert. And so here, you know, you think about it 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever it was, there wasn't a whole lot out here. There were some streams and stuff, but you had more oases, it seems like. Little streams and things that were out here. And it continues to dry up. They talk about how everything from the Mississippi to the Pacific is in a 100-year flood, 100-year drought. You know, why are we in a 100-year drought? Part of that is we've been cutting down the forests. As Brazil is cutting down more and more of the tropical rainforests, they're having similar issues. So it could be, that all could be part of it. We're disrupting the water cycle to a certain extent. That's one theory. Another theory talks about how the planet is on I think it's a 26,000 year rotation, where there's a wobble in the Earth's rotation. I don't know if you've ever heard that. Because of that wobble, every 26,000 years, I think it is, the Earth is slowly shifting. And the reason why I found out about that was because it was talking about the zodiac signs. And as old as the zodiac signs are, I found it amazing that they have accommodated for this 26,000 year wobble. Which goes back to my thinking of, we always say, you know, ancient Egypt, ancient civilization. What knowledge did they have? How did they move from 80-ton rock? You know, how did they build the pyramids? When they sit there and say, we still can't build the pyramids now, well, what technology were they using? Which is why these people then come and say, it had to have been done by the aliens. Now, I think that there's a lot of information that we have lost. But that's my feeling.
So you're saying the people south of the border are the ones that built it?
What was that?
The ones south of the border that are coming into the United States?
Well, they were building the Aztec, the Mayan, all those ruins down there. The timeline is very similar in time to when the Egyptian pyramids were being built, which was interesting. Why? I mean, and that's one of the other things is why do you have these pyramids popping up throughout the whole world at similar times by different civilizations? But that's getting off topic. Chris, thanks for bringing us back to focus. So 17, God was going to shut the heavens and the earth and hold the rains, and everything would perish. 18, fix these words of mine on your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Okay, there's a group of Jewish people that actually will do this, where they will tie little symbols with Bible verses on their hands. They'll tie little things in their hair with a Bible verse on them. It's just kind of interesting. What's he really saying there that we should be? I see that as he's saying we should be memorizing God's word, storing it up in our hearts and in our minds. As I said this week to someone at work, the problem that we have is we have too many evil people who aren't learning God's love. And if you don't know God's love, then you're more willing to go out and kill someone. You know. But anyways, 19, teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors, many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. So we see that there's this blessing and this curse, and it's on the land. And if you follow God, he's going to bless it. You know, there's people that kind of try to say the same thing with America. You know, it was founded on godly principles. And I think to a certain extent, there's some truth to it. You know, I think that God does protect people who follow him, and that he does help them. You know, in that regard, I think that there's a lot of truth. I think now that America as a whole overall seems to be rejecting God, it seems like we're becoming more evil. To me, it seems like we aren't having the blessings like we may have used to. So we'll see what happens in the future. Any questions, any thoughts? No, Fred's just shrugging his shoulders. 22. If you carefully observe all these commands I'm giving you to follow the Lord, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, and hold fast to him, then the Lord will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispose nations larger and stronger than you. Every place where you set your foot will be yours, Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon and from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you. The Lord your God, as he promised you, will put the terror and fear of you on the whole land, wherever you go. So as they enter the land, and people start hearing, using the internet of that day. However quickly it took, but you still had the travelers, you had the merchants that were traveling along. So you would hear these stories. Those Jews are going in and they went into the city of Jericho, and that story would be told. As they went into other cities and one, those messages would get out through the rest of the world. And you already, I think about it, hearing how God crossed, gave dry land and they crossed the Red Sea. You start hearing how this God is taking care of it, providing victory after victory. And you start, as that message is getting out there, you're going to have that. People are going to get fearful. It says at the end of that, God will put the terror and fear of you on the whole land wherever you go. I think that was a real thing. And I would think militarily wise, isn't that one of the things that they try to do with populations? Put out propaganda about how strong the enemy is, how strong America is. You don't want to mess with America. We got nuclear weapons. You don't want to mess around with Iran if you're in the Middle East because, well, who else has nuclear weapons or the possibility of nuclear weapons?
That was pre-Biden.
Well, in the Middle East, when you look at it, it always was Saudi Arabia and Iran were the two spiritual leaders, the two sectors that were fighting each other. And they were political enemies, and they were two kind of political war areas too. Egypt was in there for a while too. I don't think it's changed a whole lot, but you can use that propaganda to your advantage. That's all I'm really saying. Any questions? We're moving along pretty quick so far.
We've got to finish this before John.
That's right.
Thanks, Fred.
26.
John will come visit in 2 years, and we'll be on Deuteronomy 12.
Verse 26, so we see again now he's talking about blessings and curses. See, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commands of the Lord your God, that I am giving you today. The curse, if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I command you today by following other gods, which you have not known. When the Lord your God has brought you into the land you are to enter, to possess, and to possess, you are to proclaim on Mount Gerizim the blessings and on Mount Ebal the curses. And as you know, these mountains are across the Jordan, westward toward the setting sun, near the great trees of Morah, in the territory of the Canaanites living in the Arabia in the vicinity of Gilgal. You are about to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you. When you have taken it over and you are living there, be sure that you obey all these decrees and laws I am setting before you today. So any questions so far? See, we finished chapter 11. John, aren't you impressed?
Totally.
All right. 12. These are the decrees and laws you must be careful to follow in the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, have given you to possess. As long as you live in the land, destroy completely all the places on the high mountains, on the hills, under every spreading tree, where the nations you are disposing worship their gods. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and burn their Asherah poles in the fire. Cut down the idols of the gods and wipe out the names from those places. So what is he basically saying to do?
Get rid of idols.
It's a little bit more though than just get rid of the idols. It's get rid of all the pagan worship. Did you have a thought?
I was just reading quickly.
She has a good note. She wants to share a
It
good
says, when
note.
taking over a nation, the Israelites were supposed to destroy every pagan altar and idol in the land. God knew it would be easy for them to change their beliefs if they started using those altars, so nothing was to remain that might tempt them to worship idols. We too should ruthlessly find and remove any centers of false worship in our lives. These may be activities, attitudes, possessions, relationships, places, or habits, anything that tempts us to turn our hearts from God and do wrong. We should never flatter ourselves by thinking we're too strong to be tempted. Israel learned that lesson the hard way. I like that. Because we do think, my faith is so strong, nothing's gonna change me. I'm a good Christian. And I go out into all this temptation, and then I think, what happened to my faith? So he's asking us to take a look at our lives and remove these temptations.
Yeah. Las Vegas has a lot of temptation.
I think we all do in our own personal lives.
And I'm just saying Las Vegas is known for its temptations. Whether it's true or not. But, yeah. You go to Las Vegas, you party, you have all sorts of partying places here. You go to Las Vegas, you can go to the shows and get entertained. You got the casinos. You know, some people will sit there and say, casinos are a big temptation. My friend's wife used to gamble her yearly salary away. Temptation is not a good thing. Gambling is not a good thing for her. But she'll tell you she had an addictive personality. Because when she started off, it was alcohol, and then it was drugs. And as she cleared herself up off of all that, eventually it went to gambling. You know. So there's a lot of temptations here.
Well, one of the things is to be liked and loved. Fun is a good way to attract other human beings to like you, listening. And if you notice, all the evil things or the things that don't glorify God are fun. And so that is a temptation, and it's easy to get that, because you never hear of anybody saying, you know, I'm going to go to Bible study, it's so much fun. You know, and so it's how we personally look at our own faith and lives, and that temptation is out there. And temptation is very serious. Nobody takes it seriously, and it's very serious. I mean, there's so much temptations in people's life. You know, like I could say, my job the people that I work with. I work with 12 other people, not one of them is a Christian. And, you know, and I do say my faith is so strong I won't be wavered, but I'm constantly tempted into that fun or whatever. So he's just asking us to use some common sense, and if we all, as a sinner, being born a sinner, we have trouble with temptation. So let's take a look at it and see what we can remove out of our lives that tempt us to do or have the thoughts of evilness.
What you're doing.
I say that every day.
I think the key part, a key part of what you said is that people don't associate church with fun. And why is that? Well, you know, we come here to worship, we all leave. And most of the times, even here at church, most members, including me, don't make a big effort to come and get involved in anything. You know, so how can we sit here and say, oh, church is a fun place to be? Kids might say it's a fun place for Sunday school, or VBS is fun. Game night is one of those little things.
Or any kind of fellowship, dinner after Saturday, anything like that, but how many, you know, in reality, people go to church, they go to Bible study, and they go to church, and that's pretty much about it. And we go there to get recharged and to worship and hear the word and all that, but we can have that fun, but a lot of us choose not to because there's so many other temptations in our life that prevents us, and the number one thing is time. You know, that's my biggest thing. 1,000% of the time I say, I don't have time. I don't have time. Nobody has time. And we don't make time to have that fun with our sisters and brothers. But we'll be the first to make time to go have fun down in Las Vegas. Let's go to Las Vegas and have fun for the weekend. We'll definitely make time for that. So that's something to think about, you know. How come you can make time for that, but you can't make time for, let's do something at church. Let's go to a ball game or out to dinner or something together, you know, and have fun. Because a lot of times it doesn't. It can, and very rarely it does, but.
And just from a societal viewpoint, why go to church? You know, it's no fun there. You know, I mean, in that kind of Saturday night services. Why go to Saturday night service? They sing those old hymns. You know, I want to go to the 10:45 service where they have the you know, praise band leading us on songs from the 70s, because that's so new. I shouldn't joke about that, but you know, down the road, Canyon Ridge. One of the things I think people do like about Canyon Ridge is their worship ministry. You know, if you are into music, playing an instrument, you have a better chance of getting into the music ministry at Canyon Ridge than you probably do here. Just because I don't hear bands playing, you know, instruments here. And for some people, that's one of those fun things. Yeah.
A lot about the church is a stigma. You know, how many times do you hear, oh, that John Riley, he's a churchgoer. How many times do you hear that? What's a churchgoer to you? You know, what does that mean? Or they, you know, and if you really have someone and you're talking to them and you invite them, they say, oh no, I don't belong there. You know, I've done a lot in my life, I don't belong there. And that's a hard thing to talk to somebody about, I don't belong there. You're the perfect person that belongs there. But anyway, that's their feeling, because I go back to where Jesus tells us, spread his word, spread the word, and we don't. I'm one of the biggest ones, we don't. And there's so many people that have no idea about Jesus or what communion is or that forgiveness of sins, so they don't belong, and they're not gonna go out of their way to come here and this and that. And a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot, I mostly blame on Satan, but a lot of it I blame on us
Christians, our relationship with our own word, how we're not out there spreading the word and changing the mind, because we don't. We're not out telling everybody, hey, you know, please come to church and worship with me, you know, it's really great, oh, this, we just don't.
Same thing.
We just
Hey,
don't.
come to Sunday night Bible study, it's really fun. We have a great time. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's good. I used to say that all the time, I like hearing people's testimonies. You know, tell me about your faith walk with God. And yet, less and less places are even doing testimonies. I think testimonies are very key, especially for the younger generation, to hear. Because when I was in high school and I heard Ricky Shaw, who came to know Christ in jail, you know, talk about how God radically changed him, you know. You need those stories. You need to hear that God does change people's lives. You need to, I think, you need to hear how some people are successful, where God blesses them overcoming heart disease or, you know, cancer.
Absolutely, everything. The general public needs to hear about Jesus. The people that don't come to church, and the only place they can hear that is from people who know and have a relationship with Jesus, and we're not big on doing it because I don't have time.
Or I don't want to share my faith. I don't want to push my feelings on others. But yet it's okay in society to push transgenderism,
Yes.
you know, or just picking on that because that's one of the hot topics now. You know, it's okay to force that down people in America, but it's not okay for them to share their faith, that God, you know, changed their lives. And yet, if you bring that up, most people won't even see the connection. I really don't think a lot of people who are pushing transgenderism feel that they're proselytizing. You know, they don't want to hear about God, because if I tell them about God, it's probably going to tell them that they're wrong. They need to accept themselves.
Same thing with abortion.
Everything, and I've always said that. That is society minimizing sin. Exactly what it is.
I had a conversation with the pastor who said the problem with talking about abortion in church is when they say that right now they estimate that 50% of all women have had abortions. And
50%?
that's what they're claiming now.
I'm shocked by that.
I think that's on the high end.
I think that's way too high.
Yeah, I don't know.
Way too high. I would be floored if that's true.
I know that an awful lot of women at my work have had them, and they'll tell you that they had them, and they better keep abortion legal because we need it, even though I have said technology has changed.
That is so sad.
Yeah. Of course, now, a lot of the women that I work with are minority women who, you know, the person who started Planned Parenthood is trying to get rid of the black population through abortion. If you're not aware of that. Eugenics was big. But if that's the case, if 50% of my female population had an abortion, and I come out and say how wrong it is, I better be preaching a message of forgiveness on top of it. And when I was growing up, it was no forgiveness. You know, I think that was one of the things. The same thing with divorce. When my sister went through divorce, the church didn't come out and say, you know, you are going through divorce, God can forgive this. It was, basically, this is an unforgivable sin. And that's what my wife, that's what, my sister heard. You know, and that's where society was at that time, dealing with, you know, how to handle that whole situation. You know, you don't necessarily want it to be easy to get a divorce, because that's not probably the right thing either, but now we've made it so simple.
Same thing with marriage. It's too easy to get married, too easy to get divorced.
And I think that that's the short-term solution, you know, that people look at. You know, well, what's the difference between living together and being married? It's just a piece of paper. There's not, no, I think that there's more. But the younger generation doesn't see it that way. Maybe that goes back to where we finished up in the last chapter, you know, when you walk, when you sit, when you stand and talk to your kids all the time about God. But as far as this goes, yeah, we were, all the fun things, the places of worship, they were supposed to destroy all their idols, all their altars, their places of worship. That's really what they're being told, is to destroy them. Because if you didn't destroy them, then you're going to be tempted. You know? And those ceremonies, a lot of those ceremonies were, you know, involved drinking, involved drugs, involved sex. Satan has always used the same basic things to tempt people. And so that's where he was going. I think we're on verse 4, right? You must not worship the Lord your God in their way, but you are to seek the place the Lord your God will choose from among all your tribes, put his name there for his dwelling, to the place you must go. So what's he referring to here? They're out wandering out in the wilderness. They have the tent of meeting, or the tabernacle, which is God's home. And when they would move, they would take the tabernacle, they'd take it down, they would move, then they'd set it back up, right? So now they're moving into a territory of whatever it is, 90 miles wide or long, and 20 miles or 40 miles wide, whatever it is. I don't know how long, what the size of it was. And now you're going to have one place where the tabernacle is going to be set up. So there's a change that's happening here as they come into the promised land. And so some of the things that people are going to be getting into are talking about that. But so that's why that's where he's going. But there you are to seek the place the Lord your God will choose from among you all the tribes, to put his name there for his dwelling. To that place, singular, you see that? To that place you must go. There, bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your special gifts, what you have vowed to give, and your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. There in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your families shall eat and shall rejoice in everything you have put your hand to, because the Lord your God has blessed you.
What's a burnt offering?
A burnt offering? It's a offering basically for your sin. It'd be an
Is it a material thing?
Huh?
Is it a material thing?
No, it would be a goat or a cow.
So it is a material thing. A burnt offering?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in that regard, it's an animal sacrifice. It's put on the
Oh, I thought
altar
it
of
said,
God.
I thought it said later on that your animals, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Remember, Isaac when he was sacrificed.
So what do they do with the firstborn animals of the herds and flocks?
They're sacrificed to God.
And they become a burnt offering.
Well, they're given to the Levites actually, as the priestly tribe, and they're supposed to live off of that. So they would be, I shouldn't say sacrificed, but that they would be killed as their food source. Or if there was a offering, first fruits offering, first harvest offering, that went to the Levites. And that's what the Levites were supposed to live off. On top of that, part of that was sacrificed in the temple to God. However they were doing that.
There's a lot of stuff to break with, to know what all of them were.
And most of it was all done in as a way to refocus on God and thank Him. You know. But yeah, that's why, getting back to Isaac, Isaac was supposed to be a burnt offering. So when Abraham sat there and told the two servants, Abraham and we will go up and worship and offer, and we will return. I'm like, wait a second. Isaac's supposed to be a burnt offering. So obviously Abraham had an awful lot of faith that God was going to do something. Whether God was going to provide the sheep, or God was going to allow him to sacrifice Isaac and then bring him back to life. You know. But so on verse 8, oh my gosh, it's almost quarter to. So verse 8, you are not to do as we do here today, everyone doing as they see fit. Since you have not yet reached the resting place and the inheritance the Lord your God has given you, but you will cross the Jordan and settle in the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And he will give you rest from all your enemies around, so that you will live in safety. Then to that place the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. There you are to bring everything I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your special gifts, and all their choice possessions you have vowed to the Lord, and there rejoice before the Lord your God. You, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, and the Levites from your towns who have no allotment of inheritance or of their own. Be careful not to sacrifice your burnt offerings anywhere you please. Offer them only at the place the Lord will choose in one of your tribes, and there observe everything I command you. So that's essentially what I was referring to. He's saying, we're going to set up the tabernacle someplace as we're wandering through. We're going to set up the tabernacle. The tabernacle is our place of worship. Don't do like the inhabitants here do, where they worship underneath that tree or on top of that hill or wherever they felt like worshiping. He's saying, still worship at the tabernacle. You know? And so, the whole, in a way, even though you're going into this new country, you're going to only worship at one location. Now, I don't fully understand how in Jesus' times they had the synagogues all through the country. So I don't know how that all arose. And I'm not sure what they actually all did at the synagogues. I don't like offerings. I don't believe they did offerings at the synagogues, or at least not the main offerings, you know. But so that's what they were told. Now the problem that eventually happened was that as they came through and conquered, they didn't destroy all these worship centers. And as God had said, you're gonna be enticed. Well, they were enticed. And the ceremonies, you know, they got into the ancient ceremonies. They didn't kill all the inhabitants, so you had the ancient prophets and teachers of those religions that were still there. The locations and things. So it was overall a bad thing. I think we're on verse 15, right?